Listen to conversations with some of today's most innovative brands to hear practical advice and insight on technology, customer experience, co-creation, marketing, entrepreneurship, and more. Welcome to the Brand Lab series from AE Marketing Group. This week, Brian has an exclusive interview with Bosch's Global IT Innovation Lead, Dennis Boecker, and 1871 CEO Howard Tullman, on location at the Chicago Connectory, a co-creation and IoT space.
So we're at the Chicago Connectory. I'm joined by Howard Tullman, 1871 CEO, as well as Dennis Boecker from Bosch. So gentlemen, welcome. Thank you for having us back to the Connectory. So why don't we start, Howard, if you would, tell us a little bit about how the collaboration between Bosch and 1871 came about.
Sure. I think we started because Dennis and his team started to send executives to see what was going on at 1871, to sort of get involved in the educational activities, some of the community, some of the different events. And the goal was to show them what was happening outside of the organization, outside of the four walls of the organization. And it was part of a longer-term vision of Bosch's to both do internal innovation, but also to have a system to intelligently look outside and to seed projects and then to bring those into the organization. And very few companies have done this sort of inside out and outside in approach. But that's where it started. And then we wanted, specifically in 1871, to provide resources for our companies in the IoT space. We had some early on. We had the Glance Mirror and some other organizations. But we thought that our job was to continue to provide resources and more expertise. And Bosch is enormous in the sensor space, enormous in the smart city space. And so they were a great partner. And when we decided to focus on expansion, one of the things that Dennis and I talked about was, should we have a dedicated space? And that's really where the origin of the Connectory came from. The Connectory, it's interesting, the Connectory is sort of the first of a series of connectories that'll be all over the world, but this is the prototype for this plan on Bosch's part.
So Dennis, we talked earlier about you have a global workforce of almost 400,000 and how you were trying to have the organization think more entrepreneurial. So clearly that was part of the genesis for this idea. Mm-hmm. So talk about that experience and the value that 1871 was able to provide the Bosch associates in terms of understanding the entrepreneurial culture.
I think for us, besides bringing executives, we as well brought associates to 1871 in the early stages already of our partnership. And it was interesting to see how associates started to really work out of 1871 like a startup and really to feel kind of what is going on around them in that ecosystem, to engage with the startups. And as well to learn about quick failure, learning out of the failure, iterating the process, iterating the product and moving on, and not being frustrated by something that is not working. So that was kind of the starting point of that educational experience with smaller groups. And then, as Howard mentioned, driving that IoT piece was one of it. But the other was, as we said, we want to make it more kind of sustainable in terms of the learning aspects. So that is what the Connectory can help us as well.
And I think also we've done a lot of educational programming for Bosch on technology trends, which is sort of one of our responsibilities to stay ahead of that. And I think I've talked to probably 1,000 by now different employees across the world, really, who are Bosch team members and associates. And it's been very interesting how much and how enthusiastic they've been about incorporating a lot of this new methodology, just agile, the whole idea of speed, as Dennis said.
Well, and then along the idea of kind of innovative thinking and new methodologies, another area that's really exciting about the Connectory is co-creation. This idea of bringing together technology, ideas, collaboration to really design new experiences, new products, new innovations. As someone who's a global innovation leader, Dennis, talk about the importance of co-creation.
Yeah, what you can see more and more, and I think regardless where you are looking right now, you find that no one can own kind of the complete ecosystem, regardless if you're talking about smart cities or autonomous driving or wherever you go. So it's always about partnering. It's because it's a lot about the speed that you need in the market. So the only way to really address that is with partnering and co-creating solutions. And what we found, interestingly enough, is that although we are living in a world that is very virtual, you need that physical space where you actually can come together and do things together to really co-create. And that's what we are doing here in the Connectory, really co-creating with our partners, which are the startups from 1871 and beyond, which are the universities here from Chicagoland, but as well other corporate partners that are very interested in engaging and helping us driving things forward here.
I think there's two other aspects of that. One is how much lateral learning is going on these days, how much technology is jumping from industry to industry. So something that you'll see invented in terms of medical technology will be used for controlled dosage in soda machines in a variety of different devices and things like that. So learning from each other and learning across industries is very, very significant. The other thing is, and we did it upstairs for 1871, but the Connectory has done it as well, this idea of design thinking and whole brain thinking, and having examples here of the work of students from the Art Institute is very inspirational. And you really have to think about the human dimensions of a lot of this technology as well when you're designing for the home, when you're designing for these different environments. And so the Connectory is a very good mix, and that's part of the co-creation process as well.
Howard, I know you're big about speed. So talk about how you see IoT evolving and what kind of excites you about that.
Well, first of all, we call it IOE these days, the Internet of Everything. It's not limited to just things. But what's exciting is I think that we're in a hurry-up world. I think that our job is to push everything to the perimeter, everything to the periphery. The closer you are to the point of delivery, the more attractive your service or your product will be. And so IoT is really the path to that. And frankly, the newest sensors that Bosch is developing are not even going to go back to the cloud. They'll make decisions in real time on site. And that will, again, speed up the process. If you have the ability at the edge to do all of this computing, you're going to be much more able to provide new services that are responsive and rapid and things like that. So I'm excited because transportation these days is something on the order of 50% of the cost of delivered goods. If you can do 3D printing using the Bosch technologies, if you can do on-site creation, you eliminate a huge component of cost, and then you make those businesses more competitive.
So Dennis, anything from your point of view about that? What excites you about the IOE?
Yeah, for us, as mentioned earlier, IoT and IOE is part of it, and I just was smiling about the IOE example because one of our projects that we did in Brazil was actually connecting cows and cattle to the Internet of Things. Yeah, so which shows clearly that we are not only talking about the things, but we are as well talking about farm management. As I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of things going on in agriculture, and doing that there is as well showing on how you can really combine and use the technology for as well connecting people and connecting, in that case, as well cattle.
And we're gonna see more and more wearable technology, not in the sense of the Fitbit, but in the sense of things that can be applied, for example, to the skin of young babies, where actually the injection of any kind of sensing technology or catheters or any of these kinds of things would be pathologically, traumatic. If you can just apply the sensor to their skins, you can do all of the measurement in a very safe way, and also a way that's probably medically more appropriate.
Howard is someone who's had a lot of experience in entrepreneurship and technology. Would you suggest that companies try to get IOE right in their space before moving into a new category? Or what advice would you maybe have for a company as it tries to keep pace with IoT?
Well, I think that keep pace is an oxymoron these days. I don't think anybody can keep pace. It's just moving too quickly, and every change accelerates the next change. But I think that in sensors, I think what's so interesting is Bosch is really omnipresent already. And so I don't know of an industry where sensors aren't going to inform and improve the performance of machines and the way business is done. So I don't really think they have much of a choice. I think a different case is a provider of a specific service, and whether they should expand before they really nailed it, before they're really successful, that's different. I don't think Bosch has that luxury. I think they have to continue to provide the newer and newest sensors, because the industry is taking that as basically the basic starting point now for so much. I mean, if you look at autonomous everything, it's not simply going to be vehicles. A lot of this is going to be driven by connectivity and by the sensor technology.
And I think for us, the importance is really to find the new business models. And we are present in a lot of different business domains. But if you're looking at it, I think the main aspect is now adding the software, the sensors, and the services to the products is to find the new business models that are compelling to our customers, that they appreciate, that they actually see the benefit in, but on the other hand as well are driving the business that we need to drive to gain the revenue that we need to drive.
Well, and with all this, connectivity creates community, which I know is also something, Dennis, you talked about that's important, not just the relationship that you have in this ecosystem here in Chicago with 1871, but globally as well. So talk about how community kind of plays a role in the IoT.
Yeah, as mentioned before, if we are talking about co-creation, if we are talking about partnering, a lot of it has to do with trust. And trust is built by the community that you are surrounded with. And I would say community is much more than just kind of the classical customer-supplier relationship model that we had in the past probably. So now we are really talking about partners, and we are talking about partners in all different kind of angles. We talk about the city as such, for instance. We talk about non-profits, we talk about startups, we talk about universities, we talk about organizations like 1871. So we talk about this whole group that is building the community, and with that community you can then address the problems that are actually around in that community and try to start to solve those problems and really make an impact, which again comes back to, as I mentioned, our main idea behind Bosch was invented for life, and what we are trying to do with that community build now is as well building that community to bring this idea more forward with our partners in the ecosystem.
And the community is not just the technology community or, as Dennis describes, the city. One of the interesting things about sensor technology is how, in the context of grocery stores, by measuring the freshness of different products and things, we're eliminating a tremendous amount of waste, because you can actually create dynamic pricing, and the fresher the goods, maybe the more expensive they are. But this is going to feed more people, eliminate waste. It's going to do a variety of different services for the broader community. And one of the central issues is, all right, the technology is great for this tiny layer of people that can afford it and employ it. The real challenge is, how do we spread that technology across the whole community, across the whole city, so we're serving all of the different parts of the economy and improving the lot of a lot of the people who aren't presently benefiting from the revolutions that we see in technology.
So in addition to building community and this idea of co-creation, Bosch has already had a lot of gains. You've talked about that in the area of IoT. So Dennis, as we begin to wind down, is there a particular piece of advice you would give an organization as it continues to move forward in the area of IoT?
I would really say the most important piece is for me to drive the core technologies. That is important for a company like Bosch. We really need to drive those, as Howard mentioned, like the sensor technology. We really need to be at the edge of technology there all the time. And the second piece is for me driving the partnerships across the different domains, across the different levels. And the third piece for me would really be to educate that experience throughout the workforce, so that you really can participate in everything that you have. There is kind of knowledge and expertise that you have in your workforce, which we probably have not tapped all of it in the past.
And my advice would be to startups and entrepreneurs in particular that Today, no one gets to be Superman, and I think Dennis said this before, that everything is done by teams, everything is done by collaboration, and people who try to design a business that they're going to invent everything just don't understand that no one has that time or resources or capability. And so intelligent sort of win-win, maybe even win-win-win partnerships are very crucial, and we couldn't be more pleased with how the Bosch connection has grown over the time, and what a great partner Dennis in particular has been. But I think this is just the beginning of connections that you'll see with large organizations, because the truth is we can build all the startups we want, but if we don't inject this disruptive technology and the innovation of those startups into the larger organizations in this country and in the world, we're not going to really move the needle. We're not going to really benefit on the scale that's important to do.
So we've talked about connectivity, we've talked about community, we've talked about co-creation, and Howard, you hinted at this a little bit, but just to kind of summarize, like, where do you see the Connectory growing in the future?
Well, Dennis can give you some of the other proposed locations and things. I mean, we just had some folks here from Israel who were lobbying to have a Connectory in Israel. But I think that it's part of a global strategy for Bosch. And for us, we hope to deepen our connection and to bring more and more Bosch resources and make those available to everyone within the 1871 community.
And for us, as Howard mentioned, this is part of the global strategy of how we are developing. We have already space in Guadalajara in Mexico. We are currently developing something in Stuttgart in Germany. And we are for sure looking at other ecosystems globally at the world and see if it makes sense. And then we need to see what are the core elements that we want to drive there. And depending on the ecosystem and the community that is already around there, and depending on the partners that we find there, it all might look a little different, but it should kind of provide the core elements of what we want to achieve, which we just mentioned before, like the co-creation, the partnering, the community build, and the educational experience.
And I just would say one more thing, and this comes back again to what Dennis said before, and that is, but it has to pay off. It has to be an engine for economic development in these areas, and it also has to be an economic investment that makes sense for Bosch. Because if it doesn't, then it's a nice community exercise, but it's not a business. And these are businesses. I mean, no one should confuse the obligation to make these self-sustaining and to make these important contributors to the larger objectives of the organizations.
Well, as an 1871 member myself, in part, a small part, albeit, of this community, it's exciting to see everything that Bosch in 1871 is doing. It's exciting to see what the Connectory is doing. And if you ever need somebody to assist you at a global level, I'd be happy to do that as well. But thank you guys so much for spending some time with us today, sharing a little bit more about the Connectory with our audience. Everything from technology to co-creation, and obviously now the internet of everything. So thank you, Howard. Thank you, Dennis.
Great.
Thank you.
I want to thank our listeners for joining us in the Brand Lab today, and to invite you back next Tuesday as we continue our journey of today's most innovative brands, as we learn how they empower employees, engage consumers, design products, and co-create experiences together. Until next time. To hear other episodes of the Brand Lab series, visit brandlabseries.com or visit iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, or Stitcher. Follow us on Twitter at BrandLabSeries. And if you have any questions or would like to participate in a future Brand Lab, email us at info@aemarketinggroup.com.
To learn more about 1871, visit 1871.com.
To learn more about Bosch, visit bosch.com. To learn more about the Chicago Connectory, visit chicagoconnectory.com or just stop by in the Connectory in person.